something was mentioned about Hicklin Lake and Dick Thurnow Park, and I would like to ask for an update on the floating islands that some of the people have been around long enough to remember, and other new people you have probably have no clue what that is. A lot of us, when Dick Thurnow was still alive, fought to clean up that lake, and the floating islands was a concept to try to do that. We, in the community, I'm a board member on NEWAC, we have not seen or heard anything about an update of the floating islands. Were they successful? What kind of cleanup did they do? And the engineers you had at that time retired and are long gone, and does anybody know anything about that?
You know, it's funny, because I used to be Josh's deputy in Water and Land Resources when the floating islands were built, so I actually may know more about it than Josh looks puzzled. I don't think he knows about the floating islands.
Well, because
It's still there.
well, I'll give it my shot. I've only heard of them as legendary. I know there was a ton of work done, and it was largely successful. I know I've done tours with parks in terms of the management around that area has also been a sensitive issue that we've been working hard with the Sheriff's Office on over the last few years. I have, you mentioned the engineers retired. I know one engineer who's still around who's been very involved in that, Don.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm blanking on her name. Thanks.
Yeah.
Don Althouse.
Yeah. But tell you what, I'm going to give you my card, and we will get you an update, a very specific update on that, because I think we felt very good about that project, and that it was a success. There's been a lot of ongoing O&M associated with that, but would love to get more specifics to you, and I'm going to give you my card.
Cool. Next question. Here we go.
Yes, to follow up on that question, the Hicklin Lake watershed flows into the lake, makes it really polluted. You know, I worked with Dick years ago in the beginning of all these conversations. And you pump it over the hill to the Salmon Creek drainage system. Now that creek is called Salmon Creek for a reason. It used to have salmon in it, but it doesn't anymore. And I'm involved with the Scout Troop, and we've done 2 Eagle Scout projects where we've surveyed over a mile of that stream and removed several thousand pounds of trash. And there is a cul-de-sac, which is under a Burien Road that restricts fish. But there's also a concrete abutment at the ocean, at the sounds where the creek meets the sound, that's on private land, and the reason they built that is they didn't want the dead salmon to smell up their front yard. And, you know, if we could find some funds from your Fish Passage Restoration Program and your Salmon Recovery Program, and if you were to remove that concrete abutment and talk to that landowner, has told us that he's willing to work with you, and if you remove the cul-de-sac, we might be able to someday have salmon back in Salmon Creek. So work on that, would you?
Hear you loud and clear. That's consistent with the type of engagement that we would like to have with you. And I haven't heard about this energy around the Scout Troop. I'm curious whether our folks, have you communicated directly?
We worked with Burien. Burien City Council members helped us out.
That's great news. Our Fish Passage program that was referenced here is we are doing an inventory throughout the entire county about which fish passage facility barriers should be removed in order to facilitate salmon. Have not heard about this one. I will be talking to, we have a fish program manager who's designing that program, so I'll make sure that that is on our list. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, this question is about the micro-housing that you mentioned earlier. I think we saw some, last time you were here, we had, or 2 times ago, you had some information about it. But what caused y'all to think you should site it here in White Center? And like, what data did you get that our community is filled with like single young people who want tiny pods to live in? I don't see how that fits our community, and so I just wanted to understand the thinking behind that.
Jim, Mark, would you like to do rock, paper, scissors?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I think the genesis of the project really was a lot of the interest around micro-housing and, is this an idea that can help really with the affordable housing crisis we have in the community kind of all throughout King County, and looking for places where that could potentially be sited. The project that what the county is doing is setting up a demonstration ordinance for the zoning to allow that to occur. It isn't a project that the county itself is sponsoring or paying for. It's actually potentially a project that would be proposed by a private market at that level. I would say as far as interest level, I think that's one of the reasons why we're doing the demonstration project is to gauge sort of is there a level of interest to...
But why here? Why would you have it here in White Center?
Because I think one of the things that we hear frequently about White Center is the concern about people having to move out, not having an ability as rents rise to stay in this community. And so we're interested in seeing what different kind of development types are able to serve the need for the people who live here as well to be able to reside in this community. Ultimately, if the project is constructed and the rents and nobody moves in, then there won't be demand for that type of project in this community.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, of course, you would find out after the fact that people would want to move here and use those small pods. But if you ask our community, more often than not, what we hear is that we have large families, we have people with kids, we have all kinds of different cultures that wouldn't think of living isolated in a tiny pod as like a good thing. And so I would think that many people who are experiencing homelessness would also want to have a large enough space where they can live with other people as opposed to separate and tiny.
Yeah.
So I wanted to understand the data, like where did you get the idea that White Center in particular, like of course we want affordable housing, but like where did the idea come from that like the tiny pod thing was going to be the right way to go here in our neighborhood?
Yeah, I think, it is a demonstration project for one, around a 50-unit project, so that's what's proposed. There's also lots of multifamily projects that we hear sort of comments within the community about, is that the right thing for this neighborhood as well, around the large multifamily projects and the impact on schools. So I think, we get feedback kind of in a variety of ways about what is the appropriate housing type for various communities. I think one of the things that we really are trying to do is get people's comments. So if you have kind of, it sounds like you've got a lot of comments or feedback on the idea of that project, I'd really recommend that you come over here to where Isaac is and get the comments included, because ultimately council is the entity that will approve and consider the demonstration ordinance to allow that to occur in this community.
And Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was also, there were really two. There was one rural and one urban.
That's correct.
So when the pilot was pitched, there's one going in on Vashon to try it out in a rural environment. There's one going in an urban environment. This is the urban environment. Next question, sir.
I have a quick question. I've sat here for an hour listening to all the great things you're doing for the White Center in my area. How many of you people live in this great area that are supervising?
Take a look around. I'm counting 4, 5, 6. I might. I'm between houses, so if you're nice to me,
Thank you, that's better than
if you're very nice to me, you might have me as a neighbor.
So I have a question for roads. We love the work you did. I love the work you did on 4th Ave to repave and feed us into Olson Way, but it's now a single lane that goes into Olson Way, and Myers Way, sorry. Pulls a lot of traffic from the south trying to commute in the morning and at peak commute times, and we all sit behind one car trying to turn left in a very complex intersection. Is there any way to put a left-hand turn signal or some other traffic management in there so that you don't get these long backups waiting for a single person that is afraid to turn left in front of the traffic coming up the hill?
I'm going to defer to my colleague Rose on this.
Okay, thank you, John. So the 4th Avenue project is actually a housing authority project. They came to us and asked us if they could do some traffic calming, putting in all of those curb extensions and whatnot. So we said, sure, sounds like a really good idea because it basically mimics 8th Avenue roughly. So that's not our project. But, you know, if you have a concern about, you know, turning traffic and all that kind of stuff, I invite you to come over here so that we can actually document your concerns and get the right people out to investigate those concerns.
All right, next.
Actually, that actually reminded me, right now there's construction going on near 8th Avenue, near White Center Heights Elementary. Are they putting in sidewalks there, or, and also, is there any way to help make sure construction isn't going on when students are walking to school, because then the kids are gonna have to walk on the road right now, and, but anyway, I guess my plug is, can we get a sidewalk along 8th Avenue towards the elementary school, and B, what can we do to help make sure during peak times when there's a lot of kids walking, construction isn't getting in the way of the kids walking?
So for now, the roundabout project, I think you're probably referring to on 108th and 2nd?
Oh, no, it's actually.
It's 108th?
102nd and 8th.
102nd, okay. Almost got those. 102nd and 8th. So that's a roundabout project. We're moving forward with putting in a roundabout. There will be sidewalks at the corner of each of the corners, but there's no continuous sidewalk continuing on 8th that you're requesting. So for the county, we try to identify, and we work with the schools very closely to see, you know, what the needs are, and then we try to prioritize it, and given our funding, we try to put money, you know, where it's most needed. So we did try to go for a grant to try and put in these sidewalks. We haven't been successful for that area, but we are continually trying to find grants to put in those types of facilities because we recognize they are needed. Unfortunately, we just can't put them in everywhere because we don't have the money for now.
And just a friendly amendment to that. And right now, Susan Oxholm, who lives in White Center, who's back there, is working on a legislative strategy for this legislative session to try to get grant funding for a variety of things, but among them are more sidewalks. Because sidewalks, people always think sidewalks are cheap. They're really expensive for what they are to build.
So, the residents are very valuable too, I just want to say that. I really want to just keep hitting the sidewalks thing. With Southgate being here, there's a lot more children going to school, and the sidewalk needs to come all the way up 108th, all the way to First Avenue. And then where First Avenue crosses 108th, that's also a turn place, where there's no signal right in front of Nimbin's. Yeah, right in the top of Top Hat. That's pretty dangerous too for cars that skirt, waiting for other cars coming up from Myers down first. So if we could take a look at that and do some assessment on safety.
We will do that. The other thing is, this is an important issue to just, David, pay attention to this, because this is something we heard in Skyway when we did their sub-area plan. And one of the things that we built into the sub-area plan in Skyway as a concept is paying developers have to build sidewalks in front of their development, but you could give them more floor area ratio or more density if they built sidewalks beyond the footprint of their development. I mean, if we are having a hard time finding grant funding for sidewalks, we can put that onus on someone else, and in that way try to tackle this problem. So it's just one of those things to keep in the mix of ideas. It may be that you decide that affordable housing is more important or open space is more important, but it's one of the values you might want to put into a bonus system for developers when you're developing.
Sorry, just a follow-up to that. Who specifically do we speak to if we see a sidewalk need and that we want to bring it up?
Back there. So go talk to the roads folks.
To the roads folks.
Get one of those cards. You can call them. You can raise the issue.
Okay, thank you.
Tonight, here, future, call the number on the.
Yep. They are online right now. They will enter it into their computer. Lickety split. That's an old person term.
Yes, John, I'd like to bring up a topic where you just talked about the community reaching out as to priorities. And it seems to me, I'd just like to bring it up now to make more people aware. The county, as an entity, seems to have you departments conflicting with each other. One big example I'm concerned about is parks, open space versus housing. just in the local blog today, the new program State of Play, that's a study by University Washington Center for Leadership Athletics in partnership with King County Parks, etc. If you didn't see this in the recent newspaper, everyone, please read it on White Center Now. It was published today. It says youth need to move more, especially in White Center and communities of color. That's just giving you a brief idea. Another concept that's been out there a little while, Executive Dow Constantine's Land Conservation Initiative to protect 65 acres of what was referred to as last best open spaces. Well, right here in White Center, next to Dick Thurnow Park, right in the community of 3 of our schools, Mary's Place and our food bank, the county is proposing the White Center Hub, taking away green space and open space that could be right there, already in this community, already owned by King County, and yet you want to fill it up with more pavement and buildings. Why can't the buildings go somewhere else where the county is proposing the money you have to spend and leave possible green space that we already have right in our community? You talk about the need for communities like this to need more green space, more physical activity for our youth. That's my topic.
Okay, thanks. Do we have another question?
Well, I'll just offer an alternative perspective that I personally, and have been involved with a significant part of the community in having a conversation about park space and also about how we provide housing. And some of us think that that would be a great way to add additional housing. So we want to be careful to think that one person's voice is the only voice in a community. And I also want to do a shout out to King County. I've been here for over 2 decades. And I've been involved in this community for over 2 decades. And I have never seen the depth and breadth of the good work that the King County government is doing on behalf of the people of White Center. All of you are here, you're serious about our community, and many of us notice it. And we notice that our quality of our services have gone up. We have lines painted, we have crosswalks, which is a bias of mine, all painted. We have you asking good questions about how we develop as a community, and I personally think you're doing an extraordinary job, and I'm glad you're all here. Thank you.
Thanks.
We should clap.
Okay, do we have another question? Or more laudatory comments? We'll take those all night. Bill?
Mr. Gare. About the Metro line, I believe it's the R line is going to run from Westwood to Burien? H line? When do you think you'll break ground on that? Early next year?
Early next year for construction on the H line.
That's a bus rapid line, correct?
Currently known as the 120.
Oh, okay. There you go.
But she's different.
All right. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to follow up with Mark a little bit, and one of the things that I do with the White Center CDA is community engagement, community work. And one of the worst parts of my job, it's the worst thing, I get phone calls once or twice a week, is about the garbage cans on 16. And I just wanted to give love to your guys' office, local services, because we're really working towards getting solutions for that. And it has been like the best thing ever for the last year, because we've been able to get some funding to help pick up garbage at least once a week. And it's made such a difference. And I just wanted to give you guys a shout out, because that was the worst part of my job. Because it shouldn't be my job, right, to worry about garbage. So, thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna just reveal a little bit about myself, which you should never do. But I'm a former garbage man. I've worked in solid waste for like 5 years. And so this is one of my big, when I took this position, one of my big bugaboos is the lack of service in the unincorporated area. And it's not just here, it's all of unincorporated King County because of the way the garbage contracts get led. And it's complicated, I don't need to go into it. But Solid Waste Division has been awesome. We've been working with them. They're the ones who are providing the funding for the cans, and we're gonna be working with them on a much longer term solution. And I don't know exactly, we don't know what that looks like yet, but there's a lot of policy work going on trying to figure out how we get a better deal for the people of White Center and Skyway and Fall City and East Federal Way. Because if you lived in a city, they would bid on that contract, and the city would build into that bid street litter cans, graffiti removal. I mean, what the city of Issaquah has baked into their contract, they have a retail store where you can go and buy recycled bags that's paid for by the contractor. They've got graffiti removal, they have festivals, they have free garbage pickup, so you can just take all your stuff out of your attic and put it in your house, in front of your house once a year, and that's built into the contract. I mean, it's not free, but it's distributed across 20 or 30,000 people. And because of where you live, you don't have the right to bid, you don't have that opportunity. And we're gonna work on that. One of my pet peeves. And I walked down the street with David Daw the other day checking out all the litter cans and was really, really irritated by what I saw. So we're working on it.
Hi, this is a follow-on question to the garbage. And I want to say that 4th Avenue Southwest looks awesome with all the curb bulbs and the landscaping. But I'm curious who is paying for the trash pickup on those brand new, beautiful trash cans?
So it's actually a grant, as I understand it, it's a grant from Solid Waste that goes through the CDA, and now it may come through us, but it's basically the Solid Waste Division is paying for it. And there's revenue, I believe it's revenue they collect from all of the haulers that sort of goes into a sinking fund. But I may be wrong about that, do you know?
I don't know precisely where the exact dollars come from, but it is sponsored by and paid for by Solid Waste out of our funding source.
Right on.
I just wanted to put back up lift up the announcement that Council Member McDermott made about the e-scooters, and make sure people know who to go to give input on that, because I know a lot of young people will have some input. But really, that's a message the community needs to make sure to sound in on that.
Thank you, Seeley. The legislation will have its first hearing before the council on Tuesday in the Mobility Committee. We will not take action in committee that day. So email, call, get your input or thoughts into the committee members and me, start with me, and committee members, I'm on the committee, and the council. It would be no sooner than 2 weeks after that before the committee might possibly take action. It meets every 2 weeks. And then would come before the full council a week or two after that at the fastest schedule.
Don't forget helmets.
Helmets, public health, I hear the public health voice speaking out about safety in use.
I bike and the e-scooters go right by me with no helmets on.
And also we're looking at studies about what maximum speed to affect to lessen the severity of accidents as well.
Okay, we have a question up here.
I had a question for the sheriff's office in regards to your stats. Does that include businesses, or is that just for residential?
It's for businesses and residential.
Because, so I answer this, I have friends that work at the Safeway stores, and they're told that they're not supposed to call in when there's a theft or an assault or anything. In fact, they've gotten in trouble by the store. So how does that work if, when they call in and they're told that they're not supposed to call in and report it because most of the ones that are coming into the store are homelessness, so they don't want to in the stats. Obviously, it's not gonna be in the stats.
Is it this, I'm sorry, go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Is it the store management that's telling them not to report it? Because it shouldn't be us.
Well, they called into 911 and was told that, why are you reporting this? And also the stores are telling them not to report it.
Well, that's not okay. We would not tell people not to report crimes. I mean, that's not something we would accept. If there's something specific, an incident that happened, I certainly will follow up on it, and maybe we can talk after this, and I can get that person's information and follow up. I don't know what store management has for a policy, but they should not be discouraging anyone from calling 911 if they need to report a crime.
Well, I just heard it today. Heard it over that Safeway's policy. Bartels are told that they're not supposed to be reporting it if it's a homeless. And so, on your stats, is it, anyway.
Let me ask Deputy Kinnemer, have you heard anything like that going around?
A lot of the stores have a policy, don't talk, don't touch, for shoplifters, they just let them walk out, so.
All of the big box stores are like that. The last store that did anything about it was Bernie and Boys. So they're hands off, that's a corporate policy. It's certainly not the sheriff's office's policy.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, as far as shoplifting specifically, yeah, that's their corporate policy as far as they're just going to assume the loss rather than have any hands-on. But if it's any other type of crimes that are occurring in the parking lot or any that's impacting employees, like an assault type situation, I don't think that would be appropriate for the management to be providing that direction to their employees. The person who's committed, yeah, we can, do a trespass, yes. If the store employee, if the management wants that person trespassed.
All right.
Just to follow up on this, is it possible to have maybe an increased presence, or sometimes you do like community days at coffee shops, but maybe do a community day at a grocery store, just because it seems like this is a place where it's a community space where people get together, and if it could just be a way for y'all to be more present at those high, like community centralized areas, that might just be a recommendation that you can pass along to folks. Just create more presence there, that way people feel safer.
Okay, I appreciate that. Yeah, we are in the process of scheduling a coffee with a cop coming up here pretty soon, so we'll try to continue it.
Okay. Yes, we have a question right there, Brent.
Thank you. I forget who it was, but earlier it was mentioned that preventing displacement is a key goal in the development of the White Center area. Could anyone who's involved in development talk a little bit more about strategies for preventing displacement?
I will let Jim field this one. I'll start talking while Jim wanders up here because I didn't spend a lot of time working in Skyway on that sub-area plan. So we developed a whole roster of strategies for, and we stopped calling it avoiding displacement or mitigating displacement because kind of what we heard from the community is we don't want a land use plan that has adverse impacts and then you mitigate them. We want a land use plan that actually strengthens the community and the people who are living in the community. So stop talking about mitigation strategies for displacement and start talking about ways to strengthen the community. And let's see that list of strategies. And there were a whole host of them, but I'll let these guys, they are spending time really digging through this.
Thanks very much for the question. Again, I'm David. I'm working on the sub-area plan for this area. So it's a really complicated topic. There's lots of different ways you can go about, trying to work against involuntary displacement. From my perspective as the land use planner, we do have some tools in our toolbox that we can use. So, for example, we could require a certain percentage of new housing units in a particular apartment building, say, be affordable at certain levels of income. We can do things to increase the number and different types of housing that are available. So if someone wants to buy a property but all there is giant houses that they can't afford. That doesn't really help them. So another thing we can do is potentially increase density so that there's more housing options for people. We, as land use planners, can't necessarily, stop the giant economic wheels from turning that are affecting things like displacement. But we can try to put rules in place that will make sure that the development that goes in is going to have some sort of affordability component to it. I don't want to call out Community Human Services. I think they also have some programs that are related to that are kind of on a different track, but there's lots of different ways that I think the county is working on that issue. That's what we can do from the land use planning perspective, and I know there's lots of other aspects of that are being worked on from different departments as well.
Yeah, and so sort of what we went through in Skyway was everything that David just described, and then how do you take those tools and build them into a development code that's going to get developers who are coming in who want to develop something to integrate those things into the development. That's the art of this, right? If you put too much burden on the developer, you don't get development. If you don't put enough, you get development that displaces people. What you want to do is have a development code where developers are actually building solutions to the problem as they're building new buildings. And we also want to do that in a way that is mindful of the fact that Mark and his crew right now are working on a regional homeless strategy and trying to resolve a big regional problem. And we want to make sure that whatever we're doing knits into whatever they're doing. So there's a lot of work. We need to talk to the community, which David is going to, and as are, the crew from local services are supporting David in that work. So you see a lot of David Daw out here. You'll see a lot of Hugo Garcia in this community working with him. There was just lightning outside, which is so cool. I mean, it was really bright. That was awesome. Yeah. Yes! Sorry, I really love thunderstorms. It's just, it's the kid. And I think with that, I'm just going to end because
John is such a ham. Hey, so I have a question. I'm curious. With King County Housing, are there conversations with King County Housing Authority and the county just around development with the mixed income strategies that are right here and happening? How is that connecting to our thoughtful way of development here for White Center?
I'm going to let Mark jump on this one, but really quickly, we talk with them a lot in Skyway, and my expectation is we'll be talking with them a lot as we move forward with this sub-area plan.
Great. Thanks, Julie, for the question. We do a lot of work with the Housing Authority and their projects. We, what we are able to do is invest funds in affordable housing projects. That's kind of, by and large, the scope of the way that we can participate. One of the ways that we've been participating, particularly if you look at both this site and over at Greenbridge, we've been supporting a lot of the home ownership opportunities that are being constructed at those locations, many of which are held down at a rate that's affordable for folks who are below market, 80% area median income. And so that's one of the ways that we've been working with the Housing Authority, and I think we look to continue to do that, particularly as they build out more of that space kind of along Roxbury, 4th Avenue back there. So I think that's another type of housing that we are interested in being involved in.
Let's see if you have a follow-up.
Sorry, I had a follow-up question to Celie's. With that development, because I didn't know about the fact that, how that process would work. And are there ways to make it so that there's more opportunity for White Center residents to apply so they have kind of some priority?
Yeah, so you can't, under fair housing, you can't prioritize the housing for, legally, you can't prioritize the housing and set it aside for people who live in that community. That's against the law. But what you can do, and what we encourage a lot of our partners to do, is affirmatively market to people who are in that community, basically doing really targeted outreach when those opportunities come available.
Okay, but had you heard about it? like, at the CDA, we hadn't heard about that.
About the homeownership piece?
Yeah, and that program.
Yeah, so we can talk with the Housing Authority about connecting with you guys on that. Those are projects that they are required to build out as part of their work, but we can certainly take that back to the Housing Authority.
Mark, you might mention the relationship or lack thereof between the King County Housing Authority and King County.
Right, thank you, council member. So just so many folks are probably aware, but actually King County Housing Authority is completely separate from King County government. And so the Housing Authority is separate, technically a separate association or a separate government of the state of Washington, separate from King County. So they have certain purview as far as building and constructing and using resources that we do not necessarily have. We are able to work together, but we are not one and the same, which is confusing. Thank you.
Just a really quick question. How is it determined that this area is urban?
In the comprehensive plan, I believe, I'm looking at my planner friends, but I believe it's delineated as a urban unincorporated area in the comprehensive plan. And really what that means is it was identified as a potential annexation area, when the comprehensive plan was drafted. More or less correct on that?
Yes. And it's set aside based on zoning. So zoning in urban areas are a lot more dense. It's served by sewers, it's served by water facilities, while rural properties are on septic and on wells. So it's a delineation.
One big difference right there.
Correct.
So I'm not sure if this duplicates this lady's question back here about the micro-housing, but I am wondering, so I see that the rental rate, I guess, would be between $650 and $1,100. And I'm just wondering, based on some information I think that was presented by David at our last sub-planning meeting about the trend of income of people in this area versus the cost of housing and et cetera. Who do we think is going to be able to afford that cost for the amount of space that they're getting if it's not residents here? Again, so I think I'm duplicating your question, but who does this work for?
I'm going to let you guys field this one, just out of the kindness of my heart.
Well, I mean, if it's specifically about the micro-housing project, I think that's better answered over here. But generally speaking, when we talk about affordable housing, the income level is measured as a percentage of area median income, which would be the area median income of all of King County, which is something around, I think, $86,000 or so a year for a family of four, something like that. So the unit would be, for example, 80% we call AMI, area median income, or 60% AMI. So it would be for families, and that number, the income level changes depending on how many people are in your family, but that's how it's measured.
They're not big enough for a family.
Right, so let me just build a little bit on what David's saying there. So I think so to be clear, first and foremost, this is not a project that we are proposing to invest money in, so it is not necessarily an affordable housing project. The units and their size and the rents that will be proposed potentially are affordable because of the fact that the units are small, but they are not necessarily regulated to be at a certain level for people at a certain income level. To answer your question, who can afford a $650 rent on a monthly basis, the basic calculation is to be affordable, you should pay about a third of your income towards rent every month. So if you're paying $600 or $650, that looks to be about $2,000 a month. So affordable to somebody earning $25,000 a year, roughly, is kind of what $600 works out. And so then you can kind of size it from there if it's $1,100 a third. So that's basically $40,000.
Yes, sir.
Can someone explain exactly what micro-housing is and what is it going to look like in the community?
Yeah, I'll let Mark come. You want me to take
No,
it?
it's fine.
I mean, I can.
No, it's fine. So, I mean, I think micro-housing, tiny homes, modular units, these are all lots of terms that get kind of thrown around. I think specifically in this specific project, it is micro, basically, as the name implies, just means really small units. So they could be a couple hundred square feet with a bathroom, a sleeping space, and a small kitchenette. For some of those units. Some of those units may actually not have in them a place to cook. So it is kind of a variety of, can be a mix of those opportunities, but by and large, small, quite small spaces for people to be able to occupy.
Oh, can you explain to me exactly what's down on Myers Way down there? What's the difference between what's on Myers Way and what you're planning to build?
Yeah, I think probably the best opportunity is there's a lot of images over here about what's being done. This obviously would be a permitted building, done under the code and allowed in that space. So, but I think there's a lot more information available over there as far as what it looks like and what's potentially could be done under the demonstration ordinance that the county council would take up and potentially approve.
Thanks, Mark.
Different direction, but I'm wondering, what is the county doing right now in support of the Duwamish tribe? And maybe more of a political question, but what efforts are being made to give them federal recognition?
I'm going to turn to my friends in DNRP on that one. Or council member. Have at it.
He said political, I jumped up. First of all, Aaron, I love your t-shirt. I'm taking my nephew to breakfast tomorrow morning because I was asked to drive him to school, and so, love your t-shirt. Duwamish tribe. We don't have a formal relationship with the tribe, but I have recently begun the practice of a land acknowledgement of committees I chair at the county council, and did that in consultation with tribal groups and tribes throughout King County. I wanted it to apply to the county as a whole, not the location of the courthouse or the meeting itself. And I made sure that I consulted the Duwamish tribe and included their feedback and their response in doing that. On a much more ground level involvement and support, they have legitimate and serious concerns about safety of people getting from their longhouse on West Marginal Way to a variety of parking opportunities across the street. And I've written letters in support of grants that we're applying for to improve that crossing and have more formal crosswalks. And have recently written to the mayor of Seattle asking in support of another opportunity they have for funding to do that. That's some of the direct ways I've been supportive and involved in communicating with the tribe. As far as formal conversation with our federal representatives about formal federal recognition, that's not something that's been part of the county's legislative agenda on the federal level to date, but it's probably something my colleagues and I should be talking about.
All right. Any other questions? Yes, we have one right here. Let me steal that from you, if I may. There you go.
So we're talking about adding all this additional housing to White Center. When were we going to increase police, medical, those kind of services? The roads, the roads haven't been improved to accommodate all the extra housing. The police, it'd be nice to have some extra police on the beat and medics.
Well,
and what's the ratio?
I'll field this one for the sheriff, and then if you feel it coming up, by all means do. You raise an interesting point, and Councilman McDermott can jump in here if he wants to as well. One of the things I've learned working in government for a long time is that for people, government is monolithic. You don't, it's just government, right? But the reality is, particularly in this part of the world, government is composed of a bunch of different entities that provide you with services. So if you lived in a city, when I got out of graduate school, I worked in a little town in Vermont that was 10,000 people. We had our own sewage treatment plant, we had our own graveyard, we had our own fire department, our own police department, our own dump. Basically everything that's represented in this room, that city had and paid for out of property taxes. You live in White Center. There are a bunch bunch of people in this room that are paid for by the executive branch of King County, either through property taxes or through special purpose funds like solid waste funds or the parks levy. Your emergency medical services are paid for by a fire district and Medic One, which is a separate levy, completely different from that. The sheriff is paid for by the general fund. Some of us here are paid for by the general fund. Your roads division is paid for by the roads fund. And the challenge that we have in unincorporated King County, and this is true in White Center and it's true in rural King County as well, is there isn't a lot of tax base to generate tax revenue. And that's a policy choice we made when we created the Growth Management Act and when we enacted the Growth Management Act. So I guess what I'm trying to get to is you're going to have some housing development here. There may be some more tax revenue associated with that. But the reality is there not going to be enormous amounts of new tax revenue. One, because of the tax structure, and two, because Tim Eyman put a 1% cap on property taxes. So the Road Services Division doesn't see any increase in revenue except for 1% no matter what happens with assessed valuation in the county. And that's a problem, that's a major policy problem that we're working with. I've talked to Councilmember McDermott about it. Councilmember Lambert's very concerned about it, so we're working on that. But I guess what I'm saying is I wouldn't expect to see hundreds of new police on the street after new housing gets developed, and I wouldn't expect to see a lot of improvements made in roads, but we're doing the level best we can, and we have a lot of people who work really hard to keep these roads functional and safe.
A lot of this housing that you're building is tax exempt.
I think actually the housing that you've been talking about tonight, at least the micro-housing, which was a lengthy discussion, is not tax exempt housing. That's market rate housing. It's developed by private developers and it would be taxed just like anything else. Housing authority housing is tax exempt. The hub that was discussed, that's tax exempt. But there's a lot of new development going on here that isn't tax exempt. You have a question?
Just for elections, how can you tell the signatures that come in if they're authentic and belong to the people voting? And then my second question is, how can you not, I would like you not to release any of the results until after the 8 o'clock deadline, because I think a lot of people that aren't really into voting are looking at the issues, or just waiting to see how it's going and saying, I'll go along with that. So I wish you wouldn't release any numbers until after 8 p.m.
Thank you so much for the questions. I appreciate it. So in a vote-by-mail world, how we actually confirm that you are the voter that got your ballot and returned it back to us and no one else grabbed your ballot and voted for you is through your signature. And so that's the only way in which we're able to actually verify and validate when people return 1 million ballots back to King County. So by Washington state law for vote-by-mail, it says every single signature must be compared to that return on the back of your envelope to the signature or signatures on your voter record. I will say that we keep a scrapbook, if you will, of all your signatures, so you can add additional signatures. Myself, I've been challenged because my signature has changed over the years. So we try to do a host of things. We try to be proactive and reach out to you prior to election to let you know that your signature is starting to look different than the signature or signatures that we have on file. But we also will challenge signatures and say that they do not match. I know people have different signatures. I recommend that people use their driver's license or ID card because that's often where we're getting the signatures from the Department of Licensing. So King County Elections gets signatures from the Department of Licensing and from your voter registration form. So I encourage you to use that form of ID to remind you, pull that out each election to remind you when you're going to sign that ballot declaration of what signature you're using. Typically in an election, we challenge about 2% of ballots that come back because of a signature issue. Luckily in Washington state, unlike other states, we have almost a month to be able to cure that signature concern so that we can still count your ballot because we're in the business of counting ballots. And so we will call you, email you, and snail mail you a letter to try to get that signature cured so that we can count your ballot. But we do signature verification. We are trained by Washington State Patrol. Will here actually leads up the signature challenge group that contacts all of our voters. Our first thing is to immediately call you. We want to count your ballot, but our law does say that your signature does need to match. And in King County, we never ever produce results before 8 p.m. on election night. In fact, sometimes it's a little bit slower than I wish it would be. We're just waiting for it to go live. And so we've never posted results in King County of the races until after 8 p.m. because that's when we can push the button, the results can tabulate. Was that your question?
It seems like you get some sort of a number. You get some sort of a number or who's ahead.
Yes. It's the media. It's the media. They're making it up. No, they're doing all kinds of things, right? They're doing polling, they're asking you, they're calling you. By the way, just a quick plug. The earlier you vote and turn your ballot back in, as soon as you get off those call lists of those campaigns, they'll stop calling you immediately because they can tell your ballots were turned back in. But no, we never ever produce results for an election until after 8 p.m. But what the media is doing is polling you, asking questions, making assumptions, and then calling races when we're in fact 3 weeks away from even finalizing that report. So it's frustrating to us too, the media.
Media. Yes, ma'am.
This is a code enforcement question.
Get up here, Jim. Come on. Chop, chop.
So there's a new business that just opened on 17th Avenue Southwest between 98th and 100th. And they have a backyard space that they're using for sometimes events with DJs and bands and things. And so the back of their property is right against this totally residential. And they just, I think, kind of opened up for business. But I'm just wondering, since on the zoning, is there some kind of a buffer as far as sound? Because over on 16th Avenue, there's a couple of different businesses that have events and stuff, but it's a block or two away, and it's not as intrusive.
Right. So, in terms of code enforcement, is it a business or a residence? Do you know that's having these?
It's
activities?
a business, yeah.
It's a business. Okay.
Cafe.
It's a business, then they have operating hours. That's what they're supposed to follow. So if it's outside those operating hours, whatever those are, and if they generate noise above a certain level, it becomes a nuisance, and then our noise ordinance kicks in. And the noise ordinance, from a permitting perspective, we regulate construction noise. The sheriff's office regulates nuisance noise. So if you submit a complaint about noise, we will verify what type of noise we're talking about and get it to the right channel. So that's what you would need to do. Someone that has a concern about that can turn in a complaint, and we'll funnel it to the right resource to investigate. So to answer your question about whether there's a buffer, it depends. So it depends what the zoning is, depends what the use is, the operating hours, and they may be exceeding their use capacity. And if that's the case, we will address it.
Right, yeah, because all the other businesses on that block are businesses like a barber shop and auto body repair and things that are pretty quiet. They don't have nighttime hours.
Right. So this is like an outdoor activity that they're doing?
Yeah.
Oh, it's a bar.
A bar,
Is
yeah.
this the biker bar that I heard about?
Yes,
Yeah, I heard it the last time I was here. In fact, I think we investigated that, so we may have a case already open. So I'll give you a card, we'll follow up.
All right, great, thank you.
All right, we're getting a little short on time because we want to get people out of here, but we can take a couple more questions if we have them. What have we got? Any takers? It looks like we have one.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw out something. This is big for me. In 2017, there's only 205 parcels out of 5,000 that were fully exempt from paying taxes in White Center. And I just wanted to throw that out there. That's only like 3% of the parcels of White Center that are tax exempt. So that's a big thing for me.
I just want to acknowledge in the room, that's a concern in this community. If you go out to very rural King County, their concern is land conservation. That's going to impact their tax rolls. And we did a lot of analysis when we did the land conservation initiative, and what we found was that even though we were buying a lot of acreage, background growth and assessed valuation actually offset whatever it was. And I can't speak to these 205 parcels and what the impact they're having, but it's a legitimate concern. People have a right to be concerned about their taxes. Do we have any other questions, or would we like to have Councilmember McDermott come up and wrap this up? We do. We have a question over here.
Hi, I'm actually, this is more,
It's an
more of a
announcement.
comment. Yeah, an invitation. So we just wanted to say the King County Library System is also here. And so my name is Hope. I am the Children's Services Librarian at the Boulevard Park Library, actually. But I'm here as a representative for KCLS. So if you have questions, concerns, or comments that you want to direct to the library, please come over and see me. I would love to say hi to you. Okay? That's all.
Thank you. And I just want to say the King County Library System is awesome. They're everywhere. And they let us use their conference rooms for free to serve the community, so we really appreciate that. And I think with that, would you like to just come up and close us out, Councilmember? Yeah.
I want to chime in on library, like King County Housing Authority. The King County Library System is a separate government, and I'm really pleased that you accepted the invitation here tonight. Thank you. And being in White Center and Boulevard Park and everywhere else across King County. Great work. Let me chime in on one question that came up in a couple different forms tonight, share a little bit more information, and say goodnight, and do all that in about 2 minutes. Displacement, gentrification, concerns about development in the community. I know that Councilmember Gossett is working on legislation regarding anti-displacement. I haven't seen a draft yet, but I know he's working on that. I'm looking forward to seeing it. I know that Councilmember Cole Wells is taking the lead on some legislation regarding just cause eviction that I'm looking forward to seeing as well. And that there's legislation coming together around a renters commission to make sure that as your council and the county is making decisions about land use and zoning and the development in ways that will impact White Center, North Highline, and communities well beyond here, that people who don't own, people who are renting and maybe struggling to stay in a community like this, have a clear voice in how these policies might affect them and affect real communities. So I wanted you to know that that was coming before the council. And in his opening, John talked about the Department of Local Services, and I have to work hard at not calling it the Local Services Department, because John says that's not an acronym he wants. Department of Local Services is being your local government. You know, in that there are pockets and larger pieces, but this pocket of King County that isn't part of a city. That King County is your local government, and a way to try to be more engaged and direct about providing local government services is to have organized the Department of Local Services. One service, one benefit that serves this community is the Evergreen Pool. It used to be a King County pool, and more than a decade ago, it was spun out of King County. In fact, all of the pools King County had at the time were spun out of the county. All but one were given to cities that they were located in. The Evergreen Pool wasn't in a city, so there was no city to give it to, but King County didn't want to run pools anymore. Pools were expensive to run. A nonprofit was formed and accepted the pool. That nonprofit has done outstanding work in keeping the pool open, operational, and serving the community in some very trying circumstances over the last decade. And not having government support like those pools received by cities. I was really pleased on a couple of occasions over the last number of years to help them with some capital funding. Through the Parks Department, through some funds I was able to direct personally in the budget, and last year in the budget, and expecting to continue through the Parks Levy to address some of their backed up capital needs, and then in recognition that this pool doesn't have a local government to rely on other than King County, and have set up the current funding and the expectation of continued funding to support that gap in their general fund and their operating budget to support local government services, a swimming pool here in North Highline. And with that, just let me close and say, I think this has been a fantastic conversation. I look forward to these conversations. They're always engaging, and want to thank you all for coming out tonight. Remember, it is all of us that are able to work together to create a vibrant, engaged, and productive North High Line. Thank you so much.